Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are around the world. My name is Karen Griffith. I am an inner freedom and embodiment coach. I also specialise in happiness, wellness, and mental fitness, and also offer NLP timeline therapy. And for those of you that do not know, that is neuro-linguistic programming. So the things I look out for in particular is the language that you use and whether it's putting you in the direction of what you want or away from what you want, and it's in the rear view, hidden from sight. So I bring that to your attention and also help you to deal with any difficult emotions that comes up when we move forward and take uncertainty and pain that we tend to step away from out of the equation, so you start to make things happen. Anyway, you may have noticed my commitment has fallen off. That is okay. I'm getting back on track. What happened was last week I was away on my holiday for a well-deserved rest, and the previous week I was just too exhausted. I also had a bit of overwhelm that happens time to time when I've got more ideas than I know what to flow. So I lent in and realised it's probably best I didn't hop on from a tired, exhausted place. Let that be okay. So I'm here today. Usually it's Monday, today it's Tuesday because I didn't get round to it. That's okay too. I get to clean up and hold myself accountable for the promises I made. I did say I'll appear once a week. I haven't the last 2 weeks, and that is the explanation. So let's move forward. So I thought I'd share some experiences as I thought they might provide a learning opportunity. As always, I always state, please, please, please take what resonates, leave behind what doesn't. Let that be okay, because I think, or we know, we live in an information age. However, it's also causing us to be overwhelmed when we're not clear on what it is we need to do, what is best for us, where our focus, attention, energy should be spent. So if that's true of you, what I would suggest is just to take what resonates, leave the rest behind. However, if it's an ongoing pattern where you're finding yourself a bit chaotic, a bit in confusion, overwhelmed, and it's consistent, my advice would be to maybe have a conversation with me. You can do this in a number of ways. Maybe check out my resources. They may point you in the right direction or might not. It depends on where you're at. But what I would suggest is having a conversation, even if it's not with me, maybe with somebody else, just to get clear on what your next step should be. So without further ado, I thought I'd share a few lessons from my retreat. It was wonderful. I went on a yoga retreat. I was away in Europe, Sardinia, to be exact, because I did post that information. Absolutely beautiful island. I was there for a week. I was able to practice yoga. I was also able to practice mindful-based exercises like breath work. That is really being conscious of the breath, what it can do for the body as well as for the mind and spirit, and the embodiment of how breath is, taking in what is needed and letting go of the rest. Meditation, having time to consciously be with whatever is coming up in a non-judgmental way, so that inner process is you can go away and journal your experience. So for me, journaling was an exercise I did for every day that I experienced the retreat and what I got out of it, and I'll go into what I learned as a result. And it was yoga, which is intentional movement, and also to be okay with certain poses may not work. And it was interesting for me because I realised certain poses I could get into previously, I didn't have that kind of flexibility. And then in other ways, I realised I had progressed, given that I do practice every day, even if it's 5 minutes to 5 to 15 minutes of stretching. I do my best to get in. But what I also noticed was because I had a long travel day, I couldn't get to Sardinia from where I live in Scotland. It was actually very long and exhausted. I did notice that there was a lot of tension in my body as a result. So I was able to be mindful and present to the fact that it was okay. I also I realised did the retreat, yoga retreat this is over 5 years ago. So things have changed, my body shape has changed. I'm in menopause, I'm 50 years old and loving life. However, it made me be aware of how I need to increase movement in the body, because certain things that I do requires me to sit down, so I need to counterbalance that. That's something that I did raise in a previous life about counterbalance. Instead of striving for balance, strive for a counterbalance and see how that sits with you in terms of anything that you do. Can you counterbalance it appropriately? And again, if you need some assistance or some clarity around what is coming up for you based on your lifestyle, I can help you with a rest plan, and it doesn't actually cost much. So it's a small investment, I should say, not cost. Because it's always investing in yourself. So again, speak to me if that's something of interest to you about a rest plan. So you can still got a notepad. I've got some notes because I'm hoping that I don't miss any key points for the time that I'm on this live. So thank you for being with me. If you get any value or you have any questions, please feel free to comment below or message. That's really annoying. I know. One of the joys of living in your own place is you've got to fix your own things, and I've not got round to that. And most people know that's a fire alarm that needs changing. Hang on. I'm going to see if I can. I'm just going to go off, please. Hang on, because I know that's going to annoy you. If someone can help me with that, that'd be great. Anyway, I'm back. So where was I? If you've got any suggestions on future topics, love to hear them. Send me a message. DM if you feel more comfortable, drop a comment. Also, if you've got any value from what I'm going to share, I would love to hear from you. It really does keep me going and motivated to keep on with these lives. So I learned quite a few things about myself, and also the choices that I made, and create capacity to choose differently if it wasn't working for me. So I'm going to talk about what happened in the context of also sharing what we did on the retreat. It was very fun. It was also nice not to have any plans. Also, not to have any schedule other than yoga in the morning, yoga in the evening for a period of time, and we didn't have to show up to it if we didn't want to. I wanted to honour my commitment to myself and my body and my practice. So it was important for me, despite tiredness, because we got into the retreat straight away. I missed the first bit because of travelling in from Scotland. But that said, what I learned was how often do we give ourselves that break, that intentional break where we don't really have any fixed plans. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to attend to obligations or requests. And that was something that was very important for me, to be grateful for the spaciousness, because I do work incredibly hard, not just in the work that I do as a coach, but also the work that I do for others. In other words, I've got full-time work, which I'm currently involved in doing. Is condensed, but what I'm saying is it was giving myself permission to relax, giving myself permission to not to do certain things. I didn't have to cook for myself because it was all taken care of. I didn't have to make my bed because that was taken care of. So many things were taken care of for me that I didn't have to think about. I didn't have to plan meals. There was a schedule. I didn't have to shop if I didn't want to. I could explore the island. We did go out one day, go to the beach, whatever was available, hiking, walking. What I'm saying is, how often do you give yourself that space and grace? I'm going to say that again, space and grace, to just be. And that was a really big piece for me. So I had, this is me, I'm always busy. I always had a full diary up until the point I moved here. And one of the things that I shifted out of, was my need to be busy, to be always on the go. And that came from a place of A, anxiousness, B, people pleasing to a degree because I was frightened to say no. I wasn't owning my no. I do own my no's now, and I do so powerfully. And also because I didn't want to deal with certain things that were coming up for me. I wasn't conscious of it at the time, and because I explore this, I work with various people in my field, you get to come across so many people and resources, and I tend to take advantage of them when the opportunity arises. And I realised that I just used different coping mechanisms and indulged in too many distractions that cost me. There was a penalty. The cost was I wasn't focused on the things that were important to me, and I got distracted with other people's stuff. So now I'm in a different place to where I was over 2 years ago since I moved. I recognise I don't want to go back to that Karen necessarily, because that Karen was merely surviving, and now this Karen wants to thrive. This Karen wants to make the most of her gifts, the opportunities, and help others to do the same. And I can't do that if I continue to occupy the spaces, places, and indulge in the things that do not support that. And I'll come on to that later, the importance of. So having time also meant I was able to indulge in reading different perspectives from my own. And I'm come across different authors. The one author that I'll recommend again, because I've recommended a few times, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. I didn't like Think and Grow Rich because it was recommended. I saw a few people, just didn't resonate with me. And I've read a number of editions, including the one geared to black people, and I kind of yeah, it resonated a bit, but it still didn't work for me. However, because I worked with a different coach, I read Outwitting the Devil, and I have to say it was a game changer, and quite a few things fell into place. And from reading different perspectives, I'm reading another book now. I'm rereading one. I had reread one book because I got a lot of value out of it, and now I'm reading by the same author another book. Because again, it was another recommendation, and I learn from going into different perspectives from my own and leaning into places that I may not have got there on my own. And this is the beauty of working with other people and learning, letting them be the teacher, and sometimes extracting the lessons. I realised two things: how much I was distracted, and being distracted, the cost or the penalty was my time, energy and attention, and I wasn't flowing those things towards me where it needed to go, hence why things happened, including in my body, as a reflection of the internal disagreement with the things that I really wanted, and how it caused anger and resentments. I think that's going to be a subject for another time, anger and resentments, that has resulted in some outcomes that were less than favourable, and that is okay. Things like this can be cleaned up. It's never too late. It just might not be what you wanted, but at least when you clean it up, and I can't stress this enough, we have an impact on others and ourselves, more importantly. And when we recognise we're doing things that are not in our best interest, and we do it from a place of niceness instead of kindness, it's very different. It looks very different, and sometimes what we think is nice isn't at all, if we're really honest about it, depending on your motives. And again, I think I've mentioned this on previous live, I do encourage you to take a look at those videos and on my YouTube, because I think I'll discuss it there, and if I have time today I will record a YouTube video. And there it goes again, really annoying, but I'm going to just go through it. So the next bit was having distance. Because I had time on my hands, I was able to create distance, and rather than lean into the decisions that I needed to make, I just accepted where I was in my process. And what I'm learning about decisions, because I've taken certain tests, and with anything, when you sit tests, the best way to experience them is by action taking, leaning in rather than saying, oh, this is bad, this is wrong, or making yourself wrong. When we create distance, we get to understand our decision-making process, particularly in times of challenge, because in terms of challenge, the chances are you could be deflecting or projecting, depending where you are, and you are sometimes, or probably majority of times, I know this is true of me, you're reactive instead of responding. And again, they all have different outcomes. Why am I discussing this? Because what I realised was I used to be up in my feelings, as they say, and my decision process wasn't always fully thought through because of thinking styles that I needed to clean up, and that will probably be a subject for another time. We have different thinking styles. It's catching the ones that show up for you during times of challenge. And I'll share one of them right now, black and white thinking or catastrophe thinking. So it's going to have an impact on your decisions and the quality of your outcomes, if at all. So by having the distance I had on this retreat, I was able to recognise how much further I moved on, where I'm applying logic and intuition and bringing them more in together. So I'm getting better outcomes, I'm getting better results. Not always in the way that I expect, and that's okay. But what I would say could be available for you if you were to try it is, where can you create some distance between a decision you need to make and how you decide to make the decision? Because sometimes the decisions could be limited, and it's very important you take that on board, for the reason when you limit your decisions, you're not necessarily seeing the possibilities. And if you're doing it purely off of feelings and you're not applying logic, sometimes we can feel a certain way, but understanding feelings are transient. They tend, emotions is energy in motion. It's meant to flow through you. It's not meant to get stuck in the body. So from a wellness point of view, if we're stuck in a style of thinking and we don't create the distance we need to see things clearly and to be open about possibilities, we're actually closed. So black and white thinking is it has to be one way or the other. So when you think of it in those terms, what's helpful, and this is a tip, is the and. So when you get into the and, it could be both things could be true, and it could be you're making a decision where it is a difficult decision, you don't have much choice. However, one decision might lead to another possibility that wasn't available up until that decision needed to be made. So just feel into the difference, and how you feel into it is how you document into your processes, your journaling. Again, I'm a great advocate for that. So that you notice your highs, your lows, and when you're indifferent. And when you're in a pace like that, because that's what I've learned about myself based on my tests, that I realise when I'm in a stable, calm, collected, grounded, clear place, the decisions and the outcomes that come from that place is great. And I'll just ask the question of yourself, will I be okay if this decision doesn't go to plan? If there's any aspect of that that's uncomfortable for you, that is the area you need to lean into and ask yourself some further questions based on what you discover. So I'm going to move on. So again, this retreat gave me the void that I needed, the spaciousness, where I got to also discover what I wanted, needed and desired, and where those wants were being met, needs were being met and desires were being met, or otherwise not. And if I was doing things that were incongruent, not aligned, to be okay with letting them go. And the reason why I call it the void is often the place where it's uncomfortable, because I know it was for me, because I filled my life with so much busyness. I didn't have time to actually think through carefully the impact of the choices I was making. So it's really curious, or it's very interesting when you take time to have spaciousness, to have a void, whereas there's nothing happening, to get to notice your discomfort with it. And I'll give you an example. For me, I used to feel uncomfortable with silences in conversations, not knowing that it didn't always require input from me or from the other person. Sometimes it's okay to just be. You see, that was alien for me because I was hardwired. This is a discovery I made a few years ago for always doing, because I thought that was what was done. You're always busy, you're always on the go. You didn't take time for yourself because it was always from a place of giving. However, by equal amounts, we also need to receive, and we can't do that if we're always doing. So that's something to think about. Sorry, because my voice is getting a bit sore. I don't know why I apologise. I don't need to apologise for taking care of myself, do I? So that was a quick break for my voice. But again, a place to look for me was that I discovered my discomfort with silences. Another one was when I realised I couldn't have spaces without things being on top. That actually used to make me comfortable. Because I've done a lot of work on decluttering, and it's still an ongoing process, because decluttering is a physical thing, but it also manifests. It's a manifestation of what's going on in the mind. So from that perspective, if you're not emotionally processing what's coming up for you, it tends to stay in the body, and also mentally you could be attached if you're not letting things go, if you're not having some sort of cadence in saying, okay, this came up for me, how I'm going to deal with it so that I can let it go or let it be. If you're not in that space at all, what happens is it builds up, and actually the physical manifestation is very telling of a need to hold on to stuff. I've again mentioned this on other lives, and I'll probably do that in the future again to circle back, because I know I wrote a piece of content on my Facebook profile regarding that, just as a place to look. And just to leave on this note, how you do one thing, in most cases, how you do everything. So the last bit I wanted to explain of what I learned, discoveries, and then I'll summarise it into 3 buckets, so to speak, is an eye-opener for me, because I heard it said by somebody I follow on YouTube, is crap fitting. What does that mean to you? I know what it meant for me. The crap fittings, the things that you make work, you force, and it doesn't come from a place of flow. I admitted on the last live that I made something work that I should have really let go. It wasn't in my best interest, and actually that had a big impact on me, including financially. I lost the opportunity to create more money for myself. It's okay, it was a good learning. I always now look, when the opportunity presents itself, to extract the lesson, the learning, and something I would encourage you to do. When something doesn't go plan, or doesn't go the way you expected, or you realised you're over-invested where you could have under-invested because it wasn't in your interest in terms of time, energy and attention. It was one of those things for me where I crap fitted something that wasn't clear to me that was going to work, and when I looked into the motives, I could see why it didn't work. It wasn't meant to. So for me, when I reflected on that experience which I shared, I could let it go, and that was okay. I know better for next time. But it also gave me insight into how I was crap fitting in the past, I'm going to basically say it as it is: shitty friendships, shitty jobs, shitty situationships. And those are the things that I started to walk away from as a means of letting myself have permission to know that I was applying force where it didn't need to happen. Sometimes you've got to let things go and be with whatever comes up for you, because in this life you only have it once, and if I intend to live this life to the fullest of my ability and use all my gifts and powers and potential whilst I'm here. So crap fitting for me can no longer be a feature of the life that I want to lead, and I want to lead powerfully, not forcibly in my experience. So I'm cleaning those things up where I forced friendships where it wasn't reciprocated, it wasn't balanced, there wasn't any equanimity. I disinvest from those. I've also had some experiences with jobs where I stayed too long, and in one case stayed for so long that it actually impacted my health. There were other reasons, granted, but when you know things are not working for you and there's force being applied and you're trying to control the uncontrollable, just ask yourself, are you crap fitting? Are you tolerating things that shouldn't be tolerated? Because you have a choice, and I always invite you to choose wisely. It's okay if things don't fit. It's okay if things are not what you thought. You can change your mind. Contrary to what other people say, it is allowed. It's just that it's understanding there's also a consequence. Choice comes with a set of consequences. It's understanding those consequences are they really the ones that you want? So for me, again, take a sip of water. For me, understanding that, again, shitty situationships as well, it's understanding and extracting a lesson that where you see there's a pattern and you're stuck in a certain way of being that is resulting in outcomes where you're doing things that are not serving you, you are crap fitting, and to be radically honest about that with yourself. It doesn't need to be with anybody else. This is a process of introspection for you that I invite you in. The crap fitting, when you're trying to make things work and then you get, and trust me, it does happen, the anger and resentment because you are flowing your time, energy and attention where it doesn't need to go, and it's not being flowed appropriately to what's important to you, what is meaningful, what is purposeful, because you only got one life. And I can't stress this enough, because if you continue to crap fit and take it from somebody who knows, you will continue to occupy the spaces, places and things that don't belong in your life. And there is a cost. And when you get radically honest, you can then accept where it is you are in your process and start to make the relevant shifts and changes to transform what was happening and showing for you in a meaningful way that will start to deliver you a life of design instead of autopilot. So again, I invite you into recognising when you are crap fitting, it's time to take stock. Take stock and see it from an energetic point of view. Because if you're drained more than you are energized, trust me, you're crap fitting, and it's time to do something about it. And in other words, clean it up. That's what we do here. We clean it up. So I'm going to now summarise the 3 lessons because I've been on this live for a bit longer than I intended. So the 3 lessons summarised in everything that I pull it together is to do less. Just to do less. Because sometimes we're over-giving and under-receiving. And when we notice that by doing less, we start to take some responsibility and accountability. And promise you, when you start to do less, you will start to see better outcomes and results. And if you're hardwired into always doing and not being in other words, relaxation, recovery, rest, all that good stuff, then I can help you with that. And I can come up with you a rest plan if that's what's appropriate, or it might be that you need some clarity in the areas where you're being drained that's causing you to be doing too much and under receiving. So it's a case of counterbalance. So that was a key lesson for me because I was already on that path of doing less, and I intend to do even less in the areas where it's not serving me. More curiosity and observation, because I mentioned earlier about reading different perspectives and learning different perspectives from my own. The world is my teacher, there's always teachers. Sometimes I don't like the lessons that I'm learning, but it's not about the universe doesn't care about that. It's about what I'm taking on board so that I can start to shift the trajectory of my life in a more meaningful way. So I'm thriving instead of surviving, because I've spent so long in my life surviving, and I don't need to do that anymore because survival is here. Does that make sense? Here. And I'm pointing to the root chakra for those that know. So if you can get into a more open way, and this again I'll touch on at another point, thinking styles. When you get more curious, you ask more questions, you challenge yourself a bit more. And I challenged myself a bit more on this trip because I had the space, I had the void to lean into. And I also observed what was coming up for me. And I also noticed triggers came up for me. And it was also interesting, my reaction to triggers. I don't necessarily need to give you evidence of what they are, but what I realised was again, in my decision-making process, I observed that this is coming to the third point, that I was doing too much and I wasn't paying attention where I needed to in the need to slow down. That's the third bit, to speed up. I do slow down in certain areas, but what I noticed was I sometimes, through anxiousness, react in ways that didn't necessarily serve me. So when I slow down, I can respond, and sometimes it takes 30 seconds for me to shift out of a habit of saying yes when I should be saying no. So again, when you slow down, you're able to recognise when you're leaning into instant gratification versus the long-term consequences, the impact of the choices you make. So I'm going to share a tip here, because the 3 things: the opportunity to do less, practice more curiosity, observation, I say, of myself, building the self-awareness muscle, and actually put it into action, which is to slow down. So I'm going to slow down 1% more every day on my decision making, just to see the impact, because it's all experiential on my outcomes and results. So a big tip I've got for you is to really notice your disagreements with the things you say you want, the things that you say are important to you, the things that you want to experience in life, what you desire, want and need. Just notice that. And to practice active faith in the things that you say you want, and to practice active faith in the things you want requires you to take action. Take action. So I'm going to share an example of this. When I decided I wanted to move to Glasgow, and this was whilst I was still in London, one of the first things I did was to declutter, and that was a massive project in itself. And I got to a stage where I was able to move a lot of stuff out that no longer wasn't important to me, sold items that I no longer used, needed, didn't make sense for me to keep. And I also, in between the move to Glasgow, because as some of you know, I moved temporarily home to my hometown, I started to buy items for my place, new items. So that was a signal that I was really serious about my move here, and I took action steps to get there. So I was aligned with the move. I mean, obviously there was other things going on, but I'm just sharing an example. So I'm going to put it to you another way. If you say, for example, you want to lose weight, an example of being in disagreement is you continue to buy items and bring them into your home, because I know this is something that's come up for me and I'm addressing. Sugary snacks, items that you know are not necessarily nourishing, that are good for you. So again, it's noticing those disagreements. So how can I act in agreement to, if that's what's true for me, losing weight? It is not to bring those things into house. It is to say focus on my diet. It is to eat only the things that I know that will nourish my body. So, okay, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you got value from what I shared. As I mentioned, I did mention one resource, Outwitting the Devil, which is regarding distractions. I might share the other resource, it depends on how generous I'm feeling, about a writer I've discovered to do with affirmations, but I want to do some more experiential, more experience, so that I can start to articulate that a bit more for you. But I'm going to encourage you to have that spaciousness, and you don't necessarily need to go away, believe it or not. Just put into your diary a time block, so to speak, where you say to yourself, for 1 hour every day of this week, I'm just going to do nothing, and I'm going to let it be okay and notice what I notice, and just be with that nothingness and see what happens. Does it make you uncomfortable? Do you all of a sudden notice you're doing things when you promise yourself nothing, do nothing? I don't mean rest, I don't mean recover, I don't mean any of that. It doesn't mean going, get your nails done, anything like that, if that's what's true for you. Just to do nothing, just to sit in stillness. Does that feel comfortable, or does it feel discomfort? Do you feel discomfort? Notice. Another place to look, in your conversations, are you comfortable with silences? Just sit with that for a moment and see what comes up for you. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you. I also appreciate if you like, comment and share this post. Keeps me motivated, also helps to keep me honest. I look forward to seeing you on the next live, and I'm open to feedback. Please do send it through. Take care, and I'll see you next week.